Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. To only the gentlemen here with us, along with Mudit moderating the session. Well, we have almost all the sharks here on stage. Mudit, let's roll on. Come on, everybody. Let's put our hands together. Cheers. Celebrate this moment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Of course, everyone had a very sumptuous food for belly or maybe tummy. Now let's have some food for thoughts. And I've kept this session very raw. Of course, though the questions have been there with me, but I haven't shared this question with these guys. Being Mahavirji at the, being one of the panelists and Amit at the other end, I don't need to, send across the questions to them and, prepare themselves. The more raw they are, the more value addition the startup founders will get, and we as an audience will get it. So let's start. Of course, I'll directly shoot.
सब सो रहे थे और आपने हमारी तारीफ करके लोरी उनको और सुना दी और सो गए सब.
Mudit is like मैंने काम नहीं करा है, but इसका मतलब ये है कि इन लोगों ने भी काम नहीं करा है. These guys can speak for themselves. Of course. So let's start with Mahavirji. Of course, you come with a very decent background in terms of startup ecosystem and. So considering the current market scenario, how these startups have been working, I mean, we were seeing the way you were responding to a few of the startups and giving your raw feedback to them. What these new startups need to learn from the the ever changing scenarios, and what strategies they need to bring in terms of building these startups? Of course, the idea would be the epicenter, but beyond that, what are the other key factors they need to look into while crafting their dream startup?
ये घड़ी चालू कर दो यार, हमको मालूम ही नहीं कब रुकना है. Sir, stop clock चालू कर दो. See, I think the first panel that we had, all the speakers kind of gave a very good overview of what they look as investors in startups, and I think all that everyone should hear very carefully. And if there's a video recording, I think they should listen to it again and again. But also in this fast changing world of startups that you said, the startups have to be very, very agile. And competition is coming from all directions. It is not only, when someone shows me a slide of direct competition, I used to see this, there is so much competition coming from all different directions. I mean, there are competitions, jewelry is being, has competition from Apple or electronics, people want to show off, their devices rather than wearing what jewelry they're wearing, etc. So I think sector agnostic competition is. So the startups have to be very, very agile. Someone in the edtech sector, they're all threatened by AI and what teachings can happen. So I personally feel that what is good today might not be required or relevant today. Aditya and I were talking on the EV. The battery technology will change, the structure or whatever is needed, whether swapping is required or 2-minute charge will be possible. So things are going to change so fast, so real, that investing in huge capital or huge operations or depending on all of that should not be done at any cost. That's why I thought the jeans manufacturing and clothes, it's not required because you're Gen Z, designed, manufactured for, and so just focus on that. Let other people do that. In my opinion, you should be very, very low cost, low OPEX, so that you can quickly shift to a different medium or different mode and do a different thing if required. That's what I think, in addition to whatever was said earlier in the morning.
And more so, what I feel that, not just focus on the current market scenario, because I've seen a lot of startups go into a particular sector because it's booming currently. You have to think ahead of the time. Like, for example, when COVID was there, in fact, I feel that COVID was a blessing in disguise for a lot of people. Okay? So you should think beyond that and, after 5 years, what things gonna turn up. All right, I moved to Aditya. Aditya, you wear two hats, of course. I mean, being an angel investor, an investor as well as a mentor to a lot of startups. And if you see the portfolio of yours, you've invested into different sectors of companies or the startups. So what additional advice you give, not just from the funding perspective, but from the overall, their business idea perspective, what additional advice you give them in terms of making them ready for the future?
That's a very great question, because a lot of people think that angel investor ka only job is to put money and then just sit back and wait for the returns to come. But of course, that is one way. but then you should not then blame कि अच्छा returns नहीं आए तो फिर of course it was my bad decision. I think where uh, angel investment money comes in crucial is not the quantum of capital at all, because 2 crore, 3 crore, even $1 million, $2 million is not going to be sufficient for a business, of course, to make this a very large company. They will continuously need to raise multiple rounds of capital from larger investors also. So even from startup side, the selection of angel investors should not be based on just capital, right? Because capital to आपको bank भी देता है. It should be based on the advice. It should be based on the wealth of experience that the angel investor brings in, and which basically helps you to cover a 10-year journey into a 3-year journey. That's what startups are all about, right? That's what the fundamental difference is, right? अगर एक सड़क पे कोई मोमोज बेच रहा है, that's also a startup, but you would not call it a startup because they are doing a business. They'll continue to run the business profitably for the next 10 to 15 years with very minimal increase in sales. But you would call a startup जब वो मोमोज वाला टेक्नोलॉजी यूज़ करे, कस्टमर प्रोफाइलिंग करे, कस्टमर डेटा को एनालाइज करे, फीडबैक लूप जनरेट करते रहे, right? All this is actually monetize करे अपनी audience को effectively. That's what a fundamental difference is, and that is where an angel investor helps you to, of course, cover that experience. So in almost now touching 100 companies that we have invested in, what I practically do as a standard practice is identify companies which actually need my help. There are a few companies, of course, in the portfolio which are beyond the help, right? There are Blue Smart hai, Battery Smart hai. These companies, Kerala Banana Chips, have grown ahead massively well. But some companies which are very in the initial stages, which need my help, is where then I try to put a framework. कि capital तो raise कर लिया है, but now from this capital, how would growth kick in? Right? What are the different forms of strategy? What are the new markets? What are the new technology that's being built? And ये बहुत बार होता है. Angel investor लगता है कि पैसा डाल दे, ये business plan था, but आप देखोगे अगर आप 3 महीने बाद एक call करते हो, business plan entirely change हो जाता है, right? Because entrepreneur, when they get capital at hands, they start to think very differently when they did not have the capital. They start to think even in 200, 300% more, of course, expansion direction, because they also have the pressure to return back that capital. So that's why it's fundamentally important that you spend time in terms of understanding what is the positioning of the business. Positioning is, for me, the biggest moat of a business is positioning, right? In EV, like we were talking about EV में हर कोई सब कुछ कर सकता है, right? A battery company can, of course, run their own fleet tomorrow. A fleet company can have their own battery tomorrow, right? A fleet company with a battery can do retrofitting for other battery companies and fleet companies tomorrow. So at the end of the day, where you are positioned, what's your core strength, what's your core market, that is where I've tried to spend more time with the startup. B is helping them to get more business, right? That is also, I think, should be a job of a very active angel investor. I'm not saying कि वो जाके मतलब रोज call करे, वो time possible ही नहीं है. But at the end of the day, understand where are going to be the majority of customers or monetization come from. That is also, I try to spend time with the startups. And third is planning their next set of actions. See, fundraise is not a one-time phenomena. Startup founder का सबसे पहला धर्म ही होता है कि वो fundraise ही करता रहेगा पूरी जिंदगी भर, right? कि आज भी कर रहा है, वो pitch ही करता रहेगा. वो the PowerPoint is like their भगवद गीता. वो ही पढ़ता रहेगा पूरी जिंदगी भर, right? So at the end of the day, understanding where fundraising has to come in, because we have seen companies which raised funds very early, they became shut. I'll not, of course, name companies, but you've seen big unicorns in China, big unicorns in India also. We have seen companies, great companies, solid traction, but they were not able to raise funds in time. They were not able to, of course, grow. Fundraising is a very important kicker in the journey, right? And how I explain it is, we all have played that game, of course, car racing game. उसमें एक nitro का option होता है, right? Where you boost. So if you boost it at the time when you are nearing the, of course, the winning position, that is where the boost is the most effective, right? So at the end of the day, understanding that fundraising is a boost, right? So spending time with founders and understanding how will that boost come in, and more importantly, when will that boost come in, and where will that boost be used to grow the business, is what I mostly spend time in.
So taking ahead the point of, how do you raise the funds? Of course, Amit, you come with a background of a chartered accountant, and none of us, apart from you, understand the numbers in a better form, because you always talk about the unit economics. So how do you evaluate a startup in terms of course, when you talk about the scalability, there may be a chances that the sustainability may take a back seat, okay? But how do you approach in the current scenario wherein everyone is now talking about the profitability and sustainability in the business, in the start, because धंधा उसी को बोलते हैं कि आपने 1 रुपए का माल अगर आप 1.5 रुपए में बेच रहे हो मतलब आप धंधा कर रहे हो. Okay, so how do you look into the startups and you guide them in terms of creating scalable business, not at the cost of sustainability and business?
Thanks, Mudit. I think question बहुत intriguing है. The reason is pretty simple. It is not the current scenario basically, and the scenario should always have been the same. It should not be that आज investors or VCs are saying, okay, talk about unit economics, talk about profitability. No, it should have been the case all the time, because we are here to make real business. And what is the main idea of business is to create value for everybody, be it yourself, shareholders, employees, etc., etc. So have people created value? The answer is yes and no. And it is no fault of theirs. So when we are evaluating businesses, it cannot be a cookie cutter approach. You cannot say that now profitability is the only benchmark we will be evaluating businesses on. It'll be incorrect to do so, because businesses can be from different sectors, different industries, and it has to be evaluated based on that. So if you today tell me that evaluate a B2C business based on only profitability, it is not possible at all. Let's face that fact. The reason is pretty simple. Today, if I want to change the habit, now let's give an example of like how Mahavir was giving about today's denim company. Is it possible we say that you become a 5,000 crore company, but to day one se profit banana chahiye? Is it possible? It is not possible, because I don't know who boycott is. If you do not pump in crores and crores of rupees on 3 important things what a D2C or a B2C company wants is supply chain, distribution, branding and marketing. जब तक आप पैसे फेंकोगे नहीं, तब आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा कि boycott नाम की कंपनी actually exist करती है. If you want to scale operations very fast and you need exponential growth, which investors obviously want, right? What do they want? If they're investing $100, they are not going to be happy with $200, $300 at the end of 3-4 years. Early stage investors को तो ये जमता ही नहीं है. इससे better तो कहीं और भी पैसा डाल दो, mutual fund में भी पैसा डालोगे, तो you put 5 lakhs, you will get 10 lakhs in about 5.5-6 years time. What's the big deal about that? I just did that. I sold some mutual funds. 5.5 साल पहले डाले थे, 5 लाख के 10 लाख रुपए बन गए. So when they want exponential returns, which is like a 5x, 10x, 15x, then it has the company has to really grow fast. And that is precisely the reason a D2C company cannot be evaluated based on that. Customer behavior change करना है, सब कुछ करना है. Now coming to the other way, can you build a B2B business or a company in a scaled manner by not burning so much money? The answer is yes. It is still possible. Although the sales cycles are longer, customer acquisition cost may be high, but it is structured, and once a customer comes to you, he or she is going to remain at least for 3 to 4 years with you. But D2C में तो simple है. आज मुझे X पसंद नहीं आया, change. As you know, our esteemed panelists are saying that आज मैंने denim पहना, मुझे पसंद नहीं आया, मैंने फेंक दिया. दूसरा denim है, तीसरा है, चौथा है, पांचवा है. But how many good B2B companies are going to be there giving the same set of products at the same value and also the same level of service? So when we look at businesses, we always look at the sector that is there. Now, the third example I want to take here is all the new sunrise sectors, whether it is robotics, space tech, etc. It is impossible to even evaluate a business, whether it's going to be profitable, not profitable. Pharma companies, healthcare companies, somebody wants to do a new drug in oncology. I don't even know clinical trials 2-3 phase में वो आगे भी जाएगा कि नहीं. So there is no cookie cutter approach. Take every sector, you see what are the trends, see what are the parameters they should be evaluated on, and then evaluate the companies. Mudit.
Thank you so much. Coming back to Amit, so you spoke about, of course, it has to be very sector specific and, thrown upon light on certain aspect of investment, okay? Seeing the current scenario, I know, that Paytm, how the Paytm collapsed in terms of non-complying to certain of the regulator, okay? So being a chartered accountant, of course, and you understand how the regulatory framework work in terms of compliances. And I always say that if you think that compliance is a cost, try to be a non-compliant, and the price you might pay being a non-compliant. So how do you think the role of a regulator in terms of regulating the startup ecosystem is playing a role first, and how that can be very, very streamlined in terms of both the aspect, because you're working very closely with the regulators as well.
A fab question and also very apt. So what is the answer to this? Why all these debacles are happening? Why things are going down the drain? Why governance is not there? Whether it is internal, whether it is external governance. What is wrong? So I'm going to be breaking up into two parts. One is internal governance. When I say internal governance, would be, maybe there is a ethics committee in place or not, whether you have independent directors being appointed or not, with the board that is going to govern the entire working of an organization per se. Now the problem is, whenever the board of directors is sitting and they are taking decisions or they're looking at certain things, they may just let go of certain things initially. Okay? Saying that ये startup तो नया है, founders को अभी इतना पता नहीं है, they are not up to date, थोड़ा बहुत चलता है. Now what is happening in this case? जब बच्चा छोटा होता है वो 10 रुपए चुरा लेता है वॉलेट से, तो क्या बोलते हैं 10 रुपए तो चुराए, क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है. आज 10 चुराए हैं, कल 100 चुराएगा, फिर 1000 होगा, 10,000 होगा. आज स्टार्टअप जब गलती कर रहा है, तब द बोर्ड इज नॉट सपोज टू से ठीक है सीख जाएगा, लेट फाइलिंग हुआ है, नहीं भी फाइलिंग हुआ है, इंटरेस्ट पेनल्टी के साथ भर देंगे. इट डज नॉट वर्क लाइक दैट. इंटरनल गवर्नेंस पर से हैज़ टू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग. And I think the more the awareness is created amongst the startup founders, it's very important. Whether we like it or not, people say, ये तो hygiene है, क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है, कुछ नहीं होता है. इंडिया में तो ऐसा है कि हाँ चल जुगाड़ है, मैनेज हो जाएगा, आप क्यों टेंशन लेते हो. ये सब चीज़ें अगर आप बैठ के बोलेंगे, I don't think so ever internal or corporate governance is going to become a subject right from the beginning in terms of startups. So जैसे जैसे startup बड़ा होता है, problems भी उतनी बड़ी होती हैं, but let go. Second, I think from an external viewpoint and the regulator, like Mudit, what you were asking, there are two very important aspects. Number one, these all companies are unlisted companies. So what is happening in unlisted companies? कुछ regulatory framework actually है ही नहीं. अब listed होता है तो क्या होता है? Every quarter, 6 months, based on what your position of the company is, you have to file certain returns, financials with the regulator. Now, a new set of regulations have to come for unlisted securities or unlisted companies also. The reason is we are not talking about small money, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars. In 2021, we saw $42 billion being infused into startups in the country. That is not a mean figure at all. VC sitting with $35-40 billion of dry powder, kahin to dalenge na. So it has to be now done in a very controlled fashion, in a controlled environment. So that regulation needs to be there. From the regulator's angle again, there should be clear-cut guidelines for auditors and board of directors also, that agar aapne corporate governance mein galtiyan ki hain, you should be punished. And that has to happen. If that is not going to happen, then this trend is going to continue. Chalta hai, hota hai, jugaad hai, manage kar liya jayega. So these two from internal and external corporate governance needs to be followed.
So governance is a piece that we should not neglect, be it in the internal or maybe the external part of that.
Absolutely.
Coming back to the meet, so we always, whenever we meet startup founders or we go to the event, we always talk about funding. कौन पैसा दे रहा है उससे बात करते हैं. Who's the investor? Who's the angel investor? उसी से मिलते हैं. But are we neglecting the other factors of the business, like the other resources, the other compliance part, or maybe the mentorship, or maybe the structuring of the companies? Because I've seen when we do the due diligence. So when we go for the due diligence, the initial fundraising it should have been happen within a time span of 3 months. वो DD के कारण इतने lapses होते हैं वो 6 महीना आपकी deal delay हो जाती है. Why? Because certain things are not in place. So startups usually neglect those aspects of the business and they only focus on the funding. So coming back to the meet, how a Bizdateup platform, the ecosystem what you're building for the startup, can create a platform for the startups in terms of the other resources you guys can provide? Not just the funding, of course, funding, many people are doing it. But can you do something on that sort of lines when giving the additional ecosystem to the startups?
So, Mudit ji, definitely one of the aspects, as you said, right, that other than funding, right now all startups are focusing on funding. Whether, as Amit ji also said, right, boycott jeans, and many other startups which came, right, they are not focusing more on what you can say is, first making sure that how they want to, plan out the things and take, your things right. What there are certain factors which they miss out on certain areas where guidance is needed, where mentorship is needed, right? And when we talk about India as a whole, right, there is what we have found as Bizdateup in overall is that we should focus more on inclusivity as well, right? Tier 1 startups, there are a lot of startups been funded and they have accessible to the funding. But what about tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 startups, right? Now the ecosystem is little bit developing as, government policies and things have came into these places that, tier 2, tier 3 startups are also getting funds, and funds is actually not a problem in India in terms of how VCs and how angel networks and other people are providing the funding. But what aspect lies in, we believe, is that in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, there is no guidance, there is no proper mentorship. As we talk about regulations and everything, they don't know how this works, right? Tier 2, tier 3, they come from very small villages and everything. They don't know all these things. And as Bizdateup, we think that we focus on that, right? We are planning on creating a global advisory board, right? This global advisory board will consist of around 21 members. This board is focused on, when we are focusing on tier 2, tier 3 startups, mentorships comes one of the, main aspects to that, right? So that is one of the core focus has been as well. Addition to that, as said, funding and all is there, right? Mentorship is what we need to focus a little bit on, and inclusivity is what we believe that we need to more add, and that's where I, insist all our, speakers here as well to how we can, help tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 startups to grow, because what we believe is unemployment can be not solved by Ambanis and Adanis, right? It needs to be solved by entrepreneurs, right? Now, as an entrepreneur, if I am employing 20 people, there will be multiple entrepreneurs who will be employing another 20, 50 people. And that's how the economy will grow as well.
Yeah, rightly said. Coming back to Mahavir quite a different question, of course. When we talk about the startup, it's all about technology. And when I saw the facts and the statistics, there are only 20% or maybe less than 20% startups are tech startups, and rest of the 80% of the startups are tech-enabled startups. And the founders normally have a misconception that if I'm not building a technology startup, that means I won't get the funding aspect of it. But how you as an angel investor or maybe investor, how do you evaluate a startup? Whether it has to be a tech startup or it has to be a tech-enabled startup, because the underlying is always the business, and on the top of that you have the technology.
You can't bola the technology. I think it's execution. See, I'll tell you, technology is available. Everyone has every possible technology. AR, VR, we saw in the morning. AI is available. Everything is available. There are engineers available. There is open APIs available. But who makes it a good business model and executes it well in terms of scaling up faster and using that technology optimally? I'll tell you, it is not about, I'll give you a very simple example on social media. So look at how Threads was launched. Great model. Great launch, but where are we now? Zero. Because it's not the technology, it's not how different it is from Instagram, blah, 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 blah. It is how they have executed it badly, and there is no follow-on traction. And I can give you hundreds of examples, great technology, bad execution. So my point is that, when Hotmail was launched, when Gmail was launched, see how great, how good Gmail was. They just did not disrupt the model of having unlimited or 25 GB or whatever. Hotmail have some MB of it. They actually launched it in a way that it became the right thing. And then UI, UX, ever-changing tools. It's not just, so never ever think that technology is the only thing. I think it's execution, always, and using the technology right. It is never technology.
So your base would always be the business what you're building on, and technology is just an enabler for that?
Technology will help you scale up. Technology, see what has, in my opinion, startups have now become, they focus on good startups focus on one single track, become a brand or recognized with technology, and then diversify and make it bigger. So the fact that people who are good and smart focus on a lean model, grow quickly, raise money, and then diversify. And that is good execution. Doing too many things because you want to impress your investors or you want to satisfy your own ego is not going to take you any further. So I'm very, very clear that it's not about, whatever they are doing with clothing, whatever SDG, whatever climate tech, agri-tech, drone. Everyone is doing drone. Everyone is doing space. Everyone is doing EV. Everyone is doing battery. सही तरीके से करेगा कौन वो important है ना. Very few people will create something that is absolutely new. Everyone is trying to do hydrogen. Everyone is trying to do, but execution.
Execution is more important than anything else.
Technology can be bought. Dhanda cannot be bought.
True. I was coming to that point only because you can hire a person, engineer, for doing a particular, coding of a thing. But to dhanda jo banta hai, dhanda dimag se chalta hai, that you cannot hire for that matter. So coming to, Aditya, how do you foresee next 5 years for the startup ecosystem in terms of sustainability and scalability, or you can throw upon light on certain sector that gonna, go ahead in terms of times?
I think in startups, 5 years is a very long time. So you'll probably see sustainability in the next 2 years, 3 years, because this is this bull phase that was there, right from 2011, right, when, of course, software companies started building out in India, to, of course, till in COVID also, Amit quoted about 2021, right, being the highest funded ever year for Indian startup ecosystem. 2020, 22, 23, when you are now seeing the bear phase, right, where you are seeing, of course, funding has become tough. And the statistics also say that. Those specifically in the later stage, early stage is still intact. Till Series A, still funds are coming in. I'm pretty sure every panelist would agree we are still fighting commonly on a lot of cap tables also. But late stage funding has definitely taken a hit. And that is why I think startup founders need to be agile, as Mahavir sir was also saying. If you are building a business just for the sake of fundraising or to impress your investors, then you are actually building valuation. You're not building business, right? You're building a business on paper. And that is as good as till the next round of funding that you get. But actual businesses, the sustainability would come from unit economics. And that has been, I think, a wake-up call for all the investors, right? This term called EBITDA was not even covered. Like in 2020, nobody was covering what is your EBITDA margin, what's your PAT, right? How are you reducing your OPEX? But all these questions have started kicking in, and just because, of course, you've seen funding is not available, then you have to be, of course, as PM said, Atmanirbhar, right? So you have to be Atmanirbhar, you have to be self-reliant. So I think next 3 years, what I personally see is, capital will continue, of course, to be hard for at least the next 1 year is what my prediction is. A lot of India startup market is a derivative of US market and China market. So I personally have this thesis that what China did 20 years back is what we are doing now, right? EVs became big in China 20 years back. Video commerce became big in China 20 years back, right? Now we are seeing, of course, Mishos and, of course, Nikas of the world. Right now we are seeing EVs like Ola Electric and Aethers of the world. And specifically whenever the US does a rate cut, which is also 2 or 3 times in 1 year, the Indian market also takes a hit, which is also expected to be this year also, by the way. So that is where I also think that this year is going to continue to be hard for capital fundraising. So next 3 years, the trends are going to be more around how you can improve your economics. You can have the best of people, you can have the best of the investors, but that does not guarantee a business. That guarantees a great pitch deck, but that does not guarantee a business. So focus on that. And new sectors are opening up, right, for private equity investments. Uh, One of the best examples that I talk about almost everywhere is the defense tech, right? No investor was talking about defense tech 4 years back. One single budget policy comes in where government says that I want to privatize 25, 30% of the defense sector to private players. And now you see a slew of companies getting funded, right? You have Agnikul, you have Pixel, you have Garuda, so many of these companies which are working with the government, backing strong contracts and raising capital, right? Now we are talking about sending our own satellite to Mars, where earlier we were just, of course, seeing what Elon Musk was posting, right? So essentially, I think these are the sectors that I think will continue to open up. One sector that I still think will take some more time, but I'm excited about is Hyperloop, right? Which is, of course, going to redefine how mobility happens. Of course, it's going to take 7 to 8 years, but we already have one company which has bagged a contract from Maharashtra government, right, for the highways. Quintillion, the company name is Quintillion on Quintillion Hyperloop. So these are the areas where I think massive adoption would come in. Tech would continue to be the focus. And third thing where I think is where a lot of disruption is going to come in is a lot of story-oriented products, brands with a purpose that we talk about, right? Now people are not just buying products. कि आपको ये टूथपेस्ट है तो आप ये ले लो, आप ये स्किन केयर या ये फेस वॉश लगा लो. People are reading labels. People are reading what is the purpose of the brand, what is the purpose of the long-term environment. Sustainability has kicked in as a sector also, right? Climate tech, your renewable energies, your every brand with a purpose. Even in D2C, what we talk about, which is considered as a massive CAC slaughtering market, is also going to see a lot of brands with newer purpose, right? Which are going to come in. One of the companies that, of course, I would have loved to have in my portfolio, but not there, is a company called The Whole Truth, right? They make chocolate bars, right? Now, imagine that just with a purpose and just with one differentiated offering, a company can come in and, of course, disrupt Cadbury's, disrupt your perks, munches of which were there for 40, 50 years later, right? I think this new purpose-driven buying approach is going to redefine a lot of investment themes in the coming.
Got it. Thank you for sharing the insights. And coming back to Amit, Amit, if you see, you have been in VC into a lot of startups, okay? So you as in VC, one is that, just investment, you have done the investment and you are a passive investor into them. How can a VC play a vital role in terms of being a strategic investor? Now, seeing the Shark Tank, they are not just investing, they are, guiding on various aspects, and for that, they are charging the royalty for that. They are they officially, asking for the royalties. So how you as a key player in the startup ecosystem help the startups to, have this strategic investment kind of thing? Like, for example, you have a company into D2C, okay? And you have a logistic, startup also. How do you collaborate between them and create an additional avenues for you as well as creating the value addition in the startup ecosystem? So how you as a player can play a major role in creating this sustainable ecosystem for the startups?
Thanks, Udit. And before I come to the question, just taking on from Aditya, he was talking about the future sectors, etc. I think one sector that we are extremely bullish on is the health tech sector. I think for the next 5 years or so, there is no stopping the health tech sector. And I think a lot of startups which are getting into not just services, but into products, into wearables, is something that we are looking forward to. We have recently invested in a company which is in primary diagnostics. So forget about India. Can I have a show of hands that how many people did their regular health checkup in the last 1 year? Can we have a show of hands? See, about 50%. In this room, which is obviously sitting in the city of Mumbai, and we all are well educated. So just imagine if you go to tier 2 and tier 3 towns, fair enough, the percentage falls to what, maybe 15, 10, 12%. And if you go to rural India, they just don't get themselves tested at all. And we are the diabetes capital of the world per se. And you know, diabetes के बहुत सारे best friends हैं ना, kidney problem, heart problem, ये सब best friends हैं एक दूसरे के. So people don't get themselves tested not because they don't want to, awareness तो है ही नहीं, but also because there are no facilities in villages. अगर आपको अपना टेस्ट कराना है तो आपको 20-30 किलोमीटर दूर जाना पड़ता है. And you're sure that once you don't want to do that, it's difficult to do. So diagnostics is good. Primary diagnostics will be a big challenge. Variables, then good variables coming in. Robotic hands coming in for physiotherapy. They are basically variables coming in. सर पे लगा लो पता लग जाएगा stress level कितना है और कैसे stress दूर करना है. So these are all things that will definitely come in the future, and startups should definitely explore with obviously the knowledge, expertise, and experience of running a healthcare startup. Coming to Mudit's question, and I want part of it to be answered by Mahavir also. The reason is simple. He is the shark everywhere, right? So, and on TV shows and things like that. So he will also be able to contribute a lot to this question. So we have a portfolio of about 140 odd companies. So it's not so difficult to link these startups to each other, saying that itna bada portfolio hai, ek WhatsApp group bana diya. That itself is enough, to be honest. We have one single WhatsApp group. There are about 140 odd startup founders there. ठीक है, plus minus 20 कर देते हैं, कोई बंद हो गए, कोई exit हो गए. But at least there are 100 startup founders on the same WhatsApp group asking for small little things. मेरे को आज developer चाहिए, चलो भाई developer मिल गया. भाई मेरा ये business है, सामने वाला बोलता है, oh fantastic, come on, let's do business together. So we are doing a simple thing. We are not doing anything supremely proactive to get these people together. Just a simple WhatsApp group is more than enough. So somebody is having maybe 25-50,000 Amazon credits lying free of cost. वो waste होने वाले हैं. They just put it on the group saying, these are the Amazon credits that are available. Does somebody want it? And so there are about 4 or 5 people always raise hands, because if you are using technology or using the AWS server, you always need AWS credits, as simple as that. So this really helps. And what we also do is wherever we go in any particular city, whether we go to say Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, wherever we are, we have this portfolio of founders meet that we typically do. So 15, 20, 10, 12 founders come together, they introduce each other in a structured fashion, and then they're just open for networking and doing business with each other. So these are the simple things that we typically do when we are just pure financial investors and not really strategic investors.
Yeah.
So it's not necessary.
No, but I have a question. जब ये ट्रांसफर होता है तो आप उसको एक्स्ट्रा एडवाइजरी लेके मोनेटाइज करते हो क्या?
नहीं करते.
वो मॉडल इनबिल्ट नहीं है व्हाट्सएप?
नहीं, अभी नहीं.
एपीआई से कर दो बिल्ड उसको.
It's suggestion taken, Mahavir. मुझे पता था मैं पैनल पे महावीर के साथ बैठूंगा ना, कुछ लेके जाऊंगा.
I wanted to everyone to wake up also.
So in next event, probably we will have a startup pitching for, wherein the client would be the VC funds who can, monetize their startups. Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of additional services.
Yeah, that's
of course,
correct.
you add certain points to what he has stated. I would like to add one more thing, and that's a question for you. How does a personal brand, like Mahavir Pratap Singh is not known as a tie and all these stuffs. He's known as a Mahavir Pratap Singh. Mahavir Pratap Sharma.
It's okay. मैं लगता सिंह हूँ, कोई दिक्कत नहीं.
So
महावीर जैन भी लगता हूँ, तो जिसको जो देखना है वैसे देख लो.
So how this personal brand plays a vital role in creating a sustainable ecosystem or sustainable startup for myself, or maybe for the startups? Does that have a very key role to play, or it's just an additional pointer for that matter?
I'll thank you for the compliment and multiple names. I personally feel that we are going through, and I need Amit and Aditya you to help me on this. I think governance is the most important thing, and ethics, business ethics are very, very critical. Any startup that is trying to have non-compliance or have shortcuts or exaggerating or over imagining stuff, and we as investors are very, very critical in this ecosystem. Before government kicks in and starts to, हम जब secondary करते हैं तो जो मन में आए valuation करा लेते हैं, फिर जब fund raise किया तो valuation तो जो हम चाहे वो कभी भी करा सकते हैं, कोई mathematics का लफड़ा ही नहीं है. So my thing is, there's so much that we are doing that is wrong. and valuations is the most important thing. A Mahavir Pratap Sharma becomes a Mahavir Pratap Sharma because if I value a company at an X value, I am not being selfish कि मेरे पास 2% advisory है तो मैं ज़्यादा value कर दूंगा तो मेरी valuation बढ़ जाएगी या मैं अपने valuer को बोलूं कि इसको तू ज़्यादा कर दे कम कर दे. People don't trust you as a startup or as an advisor, or you don't become a brand if you're not following a process which is compliance. And I'm not naming everyone and I'm not blaming everyone. We do get greedy at times, and that's human. But that takes away something because if, in my opinion, 3 startups come to me that have gone to AHA Ventures and they are overpriced, I'll call up Amit, say कि तुम बकवास कर रहे हो, तुम ये गलत कर रहे हो, इसको मत करो. And he will take that with responsibility and behave and modify. Now that is responsible behavior. And that will make a network like FAD or whoever reliable and trustworthy. If you are trying to give your own incubated, accelerated startups high valuations, if you're not following processes, if you're giving them advice, kisko aise mat kar, aise kar, these things are not good. And eventually you will not become a good investor. You will not become a good startup. You might have initial success, but eventually you will see that it will happen and you will get caught by the government or by the ecosystem at large. So I think we all have to be a very, very responsible behavior to actually take the ecosystem in true honesty rather than just taking it very lightly and a money-making proposition कि आज मैंने किया कल वो 6 महीने बाद दुगना हो गया फिर 4 गुना हो गया and मैं तो अपने पैसे निकाल लेता हूँ मुझे क्या these things will kill the ecosystem and we will have these drops suddenly. And I'm not blaming Paytm at all. You know, they took things for granted, and I think that's where, not intentionally. I mean, I'm not saying everyone does this intentionally, but I personally feel that it's very important that we continue to build the trust of not just this room, but people who are HNIs and ultra HNIs who are looking at this asset class as an important asset class. And if we don't monitor, if we don't create rules for ourselves, if we don't follow ethics and processes and compliances, we will not get the Indian economy to be as strong as it is in the stock market right now in the startup ecosystem. We're still depending on foreign funds in the startup ecosystem. I mean, I've said so much, which is very important, and I can give you a 1-hour lecture on this, but this is the most important thing that will differentiate between a good startup and a bad startup, good investor and a bad investor, and that is what a brand is.
But as a startup, founder, I usually feel that, if something is legal, that might be unethical as well. So how you demark that, if something what I'm doing is legal, probably that is ethical. So how do you demark that particular thing? Because there's a very silver lining difference between legality and, ethical point of view of conducting a business.
See, morality, I'm no one to judge morals and ethics.
But you can throw upon certain, facts.
Yeah, but लेकिन क्या होता है ना कि I'm not saying कि हमको सबको भगवान बनना है. I am a very practical person. We have to be practical. But I personally feel that somehow if your conscience allows that, and the larger group, not just the co-founders, but the top management, your investors, your board of directors, your peers, your family, if everyone feels that you are fine, or you could be fine, I think it's okay. I'm not trying to kill anyone or judge anyone, and I think we should be surrounded by critics more than by people who please you, who are honest to your face. And that's why when I look at companies and I really give them a very hard time and ask very tough questions, just so I'm seeing how resilient they are, how honest they are towards what they are doing. I might not believe in what I'm asking or questioning. I mean, if someone gives me a logical answer कि बहुत मैं jeans भी बनाऊंगा, design भी करूंगा और dark store भी चलाऊंगा, I'm fine with that. But मैं उसको test कर रहा हूँ. It does not mean that I am arguing with him. So all of these are very, very important. All questions are not questions because they are questions. They are questions because they are things that you should go deeper and answer yourselves before you take next steps. That's the whole thing.
Excellent perspective. Of course, Aditya, if you want to add something.
No, I think coming back on personal branding and of course diligence. We have spoken about startup diligence a lot. Yeah.
Even
diligence के नाम में बोला कुछ फटा है यहाँ पे.
Alarm for us that it's time is.
We have spoken about, I think, startup diligence a lot, but I would jitna time bacha, I would just quickly take this moment to talk about कि startups should also do a basic diligence from the point of view of investors also. And that's also very, very important, right? Because अब कुछ startups हैं जो decks भेजते हैं in competing companies, जब मैं डाला हुआ है already, right? They would send the deck कि sir आप हमें में भी डाल दो, ठीक है? अब मैं उस sector में डाल ही नहीं रहा हूँ, तो भी deck भेजते रहते हैं. Let's say अब मेरा check size उतना नहीं है, तो भी मतलब let's say एक 40 मिल 50 मिल की deck भेज देते हैं लोग. So at the end of the day, the startup founder should also know who that investor is, right? And what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. No investor is the best investor. Every investor has their own set of limitations which they best work with, right? So at the end of the day, you should understand that who am I getting on the cap table, right? When we talk about startup diligence, this is also a very important thing. आप सब अपना back end ठीक कर लो, but front end में, if let's say you're not getting the right guy on the cap table, right? They are there with you for the next 5-7 years of your life. So usme if they're not the right guys to work with, then even after all the diligence, your company will go down the drain. So that's why it's very, very important to understand your investor. As when we talk about KYC, know your customer, we should talk about KYI, know your investor, right? Extremely well. And second thing is, see, if your startup is fundamentally good, you don't need to oversell it a lot. Because at the end of the day, all of us sitting on the jobs, are here on the panel, our jobs is to invest in good companies. And as much as the founders are fighting for good investors, the investors are also fighting for good startup founders, right? So don't oversell it, right? Focus on just doing your basic research. If the startup is good, if there is merit, if there is scalability and execution, the investor would also reach out. Right? We do reach out coldly to startup founders as well in a month. And there is no harm in that, right? At the end of the day, their job is to make money for me. My job is to make money for people whom I have taken money, right? Both of us are doing our jobs. And there is no harm, there is no ego clash, right? So just that and yeah, you'll be through.
Thank you so much. Meet, would you like to add something? And
No,
then we'll move to, if any of the questions we have, because we have a couple of minutes left, then we'll take certain questions. We can have some mics over here, huh? Yeah.
No, definitely, as Aditya said, right, KYI, know your investor, is very much important. As we also are doing our jobs, right, as, investors are investing in startups, and we are also parking this money of investors into the startups. So the startups needs to do their own due diligence while, reaching out to all the investors, because it's about the next 5, 6, 7 years, right? Because if an investor who is coming for a shorter vision, right, and not thinking that he's just coming for a quick money on those perspectives, might not be a good fit for him, right? Companies like into research, AI, right? They need these long-term visionary investors who can be there with them, support them for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, right? Because there will be no quick money there. There will be a long-term vision which they will be, imbibed into, and they will drive towards with that. So obviously that is one of the points I would like to add it on.
Thank you so much. Any questions, Professor? Yeah.
Thank you. Gentlemen, if you kindly allow us, since we're running short of time,
We'll take
I
one
think
question,
we had
that's
a
it.
great insight. Sure, sir, please. The microphone is in your hand, please.
Speak it out loud.
Sure. And he's raising his hand
can
since the
speak it out
beginning.
loud.
आपने सुबह में भी हाथ ऊपर किया था, am I right? Please उन्हें जरूर दें, sir. उनका सवाल हम जरूर लेंगे. Morning also you wanted to ask a question after the pitch, I remember. Sir, आपके बिना आगे नहीं बढ़ेंगे. Please, आप पूछिए.
So my question is to Mahavir and Amit both. So like Amit said, unlisted है, कोई regulation है ही नहीं. So as a ecosystem and as being a participants of that ecosystem, how are venture capitalists and your angel networks trying to address this problem? How are you trying to raise the bar on, say, proper reporting of figures and not not colluding or not hand in gloves with the founders to misreport the figures, siphoning off the money, a lot of things we hear in the news. So how do we avoid that as an ecosystem? How do we raise the bar on this?
Well, as I said, if that is the case, somebody has to take objection to it. And when you are, if you are sitting on the board, then you should be the first one to take an objection. And people were talking about ethics, and he asked a very good question, saying, "Oh, legal hai or ethical nahi, etc." So what is the difference? Legal hai, legal framework hai. Ethics is from inside. If your own conscience is allowing you to do certain things, then nobody can do anything about it. So as the community, it is as simple as that. If we are not doing our jobs correctly, if you're trying to say that by any chance, is the fact that there are very few people where these things are happening. And the only thing we need to do is to nip it in the bud, right? So it's very important to do that. So when there is an internal ethics committee, governance committee, and when there are auditors, and when there are board of directors, etc., somebody has to raise a flag. And I think most of the times the flags are being raised. So saying that the flags are not being raised is something which is not possible. So externally, I think we will have to put in more penalties. Framework has to be defined. That's what I was trying to say. If you're going to try and give awareness sessions to people, उनको ज्ञान देना चाहते हो, चलो हम ethics सिखा देते हैं आपको, उसको किसी को कोई ethics सिखा नहीं सकता है. That has to come from within. So due diligence is getting stricter. Then the quarterly report mechanisms, if you are only asking for basic parameters or you are going to be asking for basic numbers, उसको थोड़ा बढ़ा दीजिए. Then the board meetings, rather than friendly chit chats and exchange of pleasantries, should be done very seriously. Agenda एक दिन पहले नहीं, आप 15 दिन पहले भेजिए. So these are small little things that all need to then change in the entire framework. Minutes should be run properly, they should be circulated, there has to be follow-on discussions. And within the entire ecosystem or specifically of the board, somebody has to be the torchbearer in that case. ये नहीं कि सब 4 लोगों ने बोला, 5वां बोले ठीक है, अभी 4 बोल रहे हैं तो क्या फ़र्क पड़ता है, ऐसा नहीं. At least get it recorded in the minutes if you can't do anything about it. If that is also not being done, then there are quite a few people at fault for sure. Mahavir.
Totally. I mean, Amit covered everything. Basically, ethics you can't control. It's a very gray area. Go mechanics and housing and etc. will still happen despite whatever reports, whatever audits, internal, external, whatever. So I think it's a very, very difficult domain. When having invested in many startups, all of us having a good team of people trying to do whatever they can, sometimes it gets under the radar. But I personally feel that so long as we all practice, and it's a very small percentage, in my opinion, at this point of time, but huge learnings, and we should continue to emphasize on that. That's why whenever I have the opportunity and I'm talking to startups and or investors, as this is a new asset class, I tell them of a huge responsibility that we have until government kicks in with stringent measures, if required.
All right, thank you so much for your precious times and sharing good insights with us. We'll close.
Thank you, Madhur. That's very kind of you. I'm going to please request all our gentlemen to step forward for a group picture, and I'm going to simultaneously please request Jeet to be here as well for joining them for a photo op. And to do the honors, I'm going to once again request our dignitaries from DBS to kindly join us here to present mementos to all our distinguished speakers. And this goes to all our panelists, sir. Post-lunch, at first the ballroom is full. उससे ज़्यादा important है कि all the minds are wide awake. तो मैं आप सबके लिए तालियां बजाना चाहूँगी. Thank you so much for keeping the room full of intelligent minds intact, and the entire credit goes to our distinguished panelists. Let's give them a huge round of applause one more time.